Anak saya didiagnose kanser metastatik ewing sarcoma pada umur dia 6 bulan.
Kalau dia masih hidup, esok akan 16 tahun.
Dia seorang yang periang. Dia seorang ahli sukan jarak jauh. Tapi saya heran kenapa penyakit itu boleh menyerang dia dalam umur dia 15 tahun.
Sebagai ibu bapa yang mementingkan diri sendirilah. Selagi dapat anak nak hidup, biar pun bergantung dengan mesin, dengan tebok situ, selagi hanya dapat hidup pun kami lagi mahu juga sebenarnya lah.
Kamu bukan bersorangan dalam benda ini. Banyak orang yang melalui perkara yang sama dan banyak orang juga yang akan melalui perkara yang sama pada masa akan datang.
Henry, he's quiet, but he's always got that smile. Through it all, he has never once complained or asked why he's the one having to go through what he's gone through.
My daughter was diagnosed in late 1999 when she was 4. As a parent who doesn't know and no knowledge about all this kind of disease or sickness, it's very difficult for us.
For Justin, he came in as a toddler, didn't really know how to walk, didn't really know how to talk. To the day when he left the center, he could talk, he could express himself. And even though some of the children may not survive cancer, I feel that they have touched so many lives, brought a lot of joy to everyone.
SCCA Sarawak Children Cancer Society started on 1999, where a group of parents gathered together. Initial purpose is just to help all those parents and patients that have gone through all this traumatic situation.
There are about 60 to 70 new cases of cancer detected among children each year. And in some cases, there are children who have some very special needs for very expensive equipment. SCCS, with the support of donors, have been very kind to help provide for some of these specialized equipment.
We provide emotional support. We have counselors to conduct home visits to the home of the patients with medical team to check up on the condition of the family. During the times when patients are going through treatment, it can take up to months. Some of the parents actually lose their job because they have to care full-time for their children. So we provide various kinds of financial aids, including monthly subsidies.
SCCS has a halfway home, which is very helpful for those who come from the rural places.
这边环境很不错，然后我也蛮喜欢这边的，空气也好，房间也好，设备我觉得很好。
Saya memang tidak ada lah orang dekat sini. Kalau tidak ada tempat CCS, tidak tahu saya mau tinggal ke mana.
癌症病童，那么不能像一般正常的孩子，如果你觉得他们很顽皮啊、不听话、不配合，你可以骂。这边的话，你要骂也骂不下。这些孩子能够在病房里面能够有活动，可以让他们暂时忘记他们的病痛，一些小手工也好，认识几个生字也好，那也算是我能够给予他们这一方面最大的帮助。
Cancer fighting is a very long process. It can take months and it can even take up to a year. So it's very important to keep the spirits up for the children. The camps aim for the youths, helping them to get back to society, to not let the setback of cancer get to them, help to build their confidence. And for the Golden Child Camp, we hope to allow parents and families just not focus on the treatment for a while be able to enjoy some activities for the families. SCCS annual expenses is approximately about 1.5 million ringgit a year. The donations that we receive throughout the year, the main percentage of it actually comes from our major fundraising project, which is Go Bold.
Hello, it is a beautiful day to make a difference. Are you inspired and are you ready for Go Bold 2013?
他也是很坚强了，老实讲句真的，他也很懂事。我们跟他讲头发会这样的时候，不是他就讲对吧？怕什么？全部人也一样跟我没有头发。
就听到孩子的笑声呢，然后看到他们可以很开心，觉得那就是他们最大的成就，就是他们给我这一方面的动力。
Our role here mainly is to walk this journey with them. And I believe that is the largest source of support that we can give to them. Find out more about childhood cancer at our website www.sccs.org.my.
I am a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with adenoid cystic carcinoma 9 years ago in 2010.
I'm an ovarian cancer patient. 2010, I was diagnosed.
I'm 80 years old now, and I'm a prostate cancer survivor.
I'm 29 years old. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015, in February 16th, February 16th, 2015, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer.
I was first diagnosed with cancer in early 2017.
6年前呢，就发现到Alan 他有癌症的。
我有胃癌第4期。
不管你相不相信都好，癌症不止在马来西亚，在全世界已经变成一个很普遍的疾病。癌症对我的人生的打击很大，因为我的外婆就是癌症去世的。
我当初一知道的时候，我心情一下子就是安静下来，然后我就想，为什么是我？
It was a devastating experience. I felt in total despair, totally lost, didn't know where to go for help.
And when the pathology report came after my mastectomy, my whole world fell apart.
Well, I was quite young when I had my cancer diagnosed. I was really shocked when I actually got to know the news because I've never met anyone my age at that point of time that had cancer.
我不懂我这个做朋友的我可以帮上什么忙这样子。
I wanted to fight this disease. From there, I decided that yes, there is hope for me, and if I go through this treatment, I will continue to live life.
I had the luxury of going through treatment and having like 3 medications pumped into me just to reduce all of my side effects. If I speak to patients that have gone through treatment 10 years ago, I noticed that treatments are very different from mine. If it weren't for cancer research, we wouldn't have developed the medications that we have now, the treatments that we have now.
Cancer research is very important because when you have people to find out all this, you can find out what is actual problem with you.
I'm glad that there is this Cancer Research Malaysia, who's always doing research to find cures.
Without research, there's no medical advancement. Like 40 years ago, out of 4 cancer patients, 1 would survive. But because of research, today, out of 2 patients, 1 will survive. So it's thanks to research that less people are suffering. What if 40 years from now, because of your support, because of our support, cancer can be cured?
Join the fight against cancer.
So join the fight against cancer.
Check out Cancer Research Malaysia. Support them. They need all the support that they can get.
Join the fight against cancer and share this video.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for choosing to join us here this evening. We're really glad that you are here with us. My name is Gurpreet and I'm the Engagement Manager at Cancer Research Malaysia, a non-profit organization that is dedicated to saving lives through impactful research in Asians. And I will be your host here this evening. Today, we're super excited. It's a new week, a new webinar, a new topic. And I realize the more and more that we come together in this way, the more and more we also realize how much we need to learn, how much we need to unlearn and relearn. And the quest for knowledge and clarity is often marked by this healthy struggle and a recognition that learning is really a continuous journey. So we're super thankful for the fact that you're here and that we get to learn together as a community. And we also want to thank My Starfish Foundation for the opportunity to embark on this learning journey and to explore how cancer survival varies across levels of access and income. And perhaps even as we go through the journey here together this evening, find out a thing or two about where we stand in the midst of all of that. But before we get into the content itself and get into the essence and the heart of what is going to be shared tonight, allow me to just sort of share what the flow of tonight is going to look like, just so we all get a sense of how it's going to kind of unfold. Right, so I'll just share, just kind of briefly here, some of the housekeeping matters. After that, we will have a welcome speech by the Chief Scientific Officer of Cancer Research Malaysia. And then we'll move into a panel discussion. We'll have 5 or so facts, interesting, awesome, really good facts that we will talk about, where we will digest and chew on the facts pertaining to our topic today, where we talk about how cancer survival varies, right, across access as well as level of income. And then finally, we'll move into the question and answer component of our time together and then bring things to a close. And as always, in our webinars, we want it to be interactive. We want folks to be engaged. We really do believe your voice matters. And it's really an opportunity for us to get to know you as much as you get to know us, as well as the information that's shared. So feel free at any point during this webinar to ask questions in the Q&A feature that you see. So if you're in Zoom, you will find that right on the bottom of your screen. If you're in Facebook Live, thank you also for joining us. You can use the chat feature there. We have folks from within both the teams, My Starfish Foundation and Cancer Research Malaysia, that will then post it here on the Zoom chat feature. Please don't use the chat feature on Zoom if you're asking questions, just so we can coordinate the questions a bit better and respond more systematically in a way that's helpful and beneficial for everyone here. So let's just kick things off with some of the housekeeping rules for today. Attendees will be in listen mode only, right? So your mics will be muted throughout the whole webinar. Also, please note that the webinar is actually recorded for future viewing, just so you're aware. I mean, I understand that some of us might not want our names to pop up, our faces to pop up, and so on. So if you're not comfortable with having your details being shown in any way, just change it. You can click on the 3 buttons next to your name and change your name to something else so that you're not easily identifiable, if that's even an issue. Right, number 3, like I said earlier, we would love to hear from you. We believe in interaction. We want to hear your voice. We want questions. We want to be able to respond to that and add value the best that we can. So you can find the Q&A tab if you're in Zoom currently on the bottom part of your screen. Go ahead and click that at any point, in any time when we have the conversations that we have throughout this webinar. You can go ahead and write your questions. And during the Q&A component later towards the end of the webinar, we will address some of those questions to the best of our ability. And at any point after the webinar, right? Sometimes we watch a webinar, we ask questions, we can't really think about what we need to ask right away. We might have some questions or other things that we want to ask later. You can always visit our website, right, at www.cancerresearch.my or email us at info@cancerresearch.my. All right, well, without further ado, I think I've kind of spoken a lot and given you a little bit of an introduction. Hopefully that was helpful. Let me now invite Datin Paduka Dr. Teo Su Huang, who is the Chief Scientific Officer of Cancer Research Malaysia, to share a few introductory remarks. And by way of introduction, Datin Paduka is an award-winning scientist. She founded Cancer Research Malaysia in 2001 and has since won numerous awards, including the Wellcome Trust Collaborative Science Awards and many more. And she was also awarded the Honorary Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. Prof. Theo, I could have elongated that whole introduction a lot more, but I kept it short, simple, and sweet. And now it's over to you.
Thank you, G, for that really nice introduction and for welcoming everyone to this webinar. It's indeed a pleasure to be here, and I would really like to thank all the participants for making time on a Thursday evening to join us. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, a number of us are going to be told these three little words, that you have cancer. And for many individuals, they'll be wondering, how much time do I have? How much pain will I suffer? And increasingly, how much will it cost? Is it something that I can even afford if a therapy is even available? But imagine a different future. Imagine a future where we can tell everybody that cancer is cured. Next slide, please. Imagine a future where instead of cancer being an incurable disease for some cancers, it is an affordably treated chronic disease. And the key here is not just about being able to cure the disease, but making sure that it's affordable for that treatment to be available to all cancer patients. Are we getting there in terms of the future for cancer and cancer patients? And this is the topic for today. Next slide, please. So where's the reality? Well, the reality is because of cancer research, because of better screening modalities and better treatment options, survival from cancer has indeed improved. So in 1970, only 1 in 4 cancer patients would survive 10 years. In 2010, it became 2 in 4 cancer patients would survive 10 years. And our goal as a cancer research community globally is to hopefully increase that overall cancer survival to 3 in 4 cancer patients surviving at least 10 years by the year 2050, if not sooner. And indeed, for some cancers like testicular cancer, where survival is already nearly 100%, or for 10 years, or for breast cancer, where in some countries, survival for breast cancer is already 90%. How can we ensure that for other diseases where the survival is lower, like in lung cancer or pancreatic cancer and so on, how is it that we can improve the survival for all cancers overall? Next slide, please. But the challenge is not just in improving survival across the different types of cancers, but also addressing the disparities in survival in different parts of the world. So today we know that in 2020, there were nearly 20 million new cancer cases and nearly 10 million deaths due to cancer. And unfortunately, even though Asians make up 49% of the cancer cases, we make up a higher proportion of the deaths due to cancer. We make up nearly 60% of the deaths due to cancer. Why is that the case? This is in part because some of the cancers that have lower survival are just a lot more common in the Asian population. Cancers like the lung cancer or liver cancer or stomach cancer are more common in the Asian population than they are in other parts of the world. And these are cancers where the survival is lower. So this type of research, doing research in Asians, doing research in the cancers that are common in Asians are absolutely critical if we're going to be able to improve survival in our part of the world. Next slide, please. But today, even though Asians make up 50% of the world's population and nearly 60% of the deaths due to cancer, the bulk of the research, which is done for Asian cancer research, is done in the other populations, primarily in the European population, with only Asians making up just 10% of the research. So if we're not part of the research, how can we be part of the cures? How can we ensure that there are more cures for the cancers which are common in our population? Next slide, please. Which is why Cancer Research Malaysia exists. Cancer Research Malaysia is a non-profit cancer research organization set up right here in Malaysia, dedicated to saving lives by conducting research in the Asian population, finding out how is it that certain cancers have a poorer mortality and how can we improve survival for these cancers, finding out how our genes increase our risk to certain diseases and make us more susceptible to or have either more or less side effects from treatment, and finding out even how the microbiomes or the bugs that live in our gut influences our treatment options as well as influences our response to treatment. And all of this work is funded entirely by donations. So if you attended some of our webinars in the past, you would have heard about our work in breast cancer genomics and how that's leading to new clinical trials and new treatment options for cancer patients. You would also have heard about immunotherapy and how we're developing vaccines for oral cancer, as well as new ways of using gene editing technology to repurpose drugs for oral cancer and nasopharyngeal cancer. But today, the topic of our discussion is really on how is it that we can improve survival, particularly for low-income patients? How do we ensure that there's not so much of a disparity in survival from cancer, such that high-income patients are more likely to survive the disease compared to low-income patients? Next slide, please. So in our program, our patient navigation program, we help low-income women overcome the barriers to timely cancer diagnosis and treatment, which could potentially prevent half of the deaths due to cancer right here in Malaysia. We started with one center in HTA in Klang, and we now have 4 centers, one in Sarawak, one in Sabah, and another one in Negeri Sembilan. And we, through our pilot programs, as well as our expanded programs in these 3 other centers, we've reduced the default rate from treatment from 15% to less than 2%, improving overall survival. We've been able to improve the timeliness of diagnosis, the timeliness of initiation of treatment, particularly for low-income patients. And we're on a mission to expand these programs together with the Ministry of Health to across the 54 hospitals that have surgical services, so that we can ensure that the survival that we can get for cancer patients in a high-income setting can also apply to patients in a low-income setting. Next slide, please. So overall, I'm going to pass over and thank our panelists for being here today, as well as thank our attendees for making time on a Thursday, be it on Zoom or on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for supporting the Bold and Beautiful campaign. Over to you, G.
Thank you, Prof, for that insightful presentation. As we all heard, research is really a critical component for us to understand cancer better and how it actually impacts local communities. As Prof said, and I noted, really profound, right? If we are not part of the research, how can we actually be part of the cure? And all of us here at Cancer Research believe that cancer will be a controlled disease one day, that only through scientific research will we find new ways to prevent, new ways to diagnose, new ways to treat, and new ways to manage cancer in a holistic way that helps individuals from all walks of life, across all levels of income, so that life-saving treatments and healthcare advancements can be accessible to individuals. And as part of ensuring that this kind of research work continues, our partners, My Starfish Foundation, has launched a campaign called Bold and Beautiful. And the purpose for this campaign is two-pronged, right? Number one, it is to accelerate the advancements of cancer research. And secondly, to support cancer patients and their families. So let's just turn our attention now to the short video, which will describe a little bit about what this campaign is really all about. Fantastic. We hope you've been inspired to join the cause in our collective fight against cancer. I'll share a little bit more details later. The numbers can all seem kind of daunting, but each of us actually has a role to play and can contribute towards the larger objective that is to empower cancer research as well as to be with and help support cancer patients and their families. So now we're just going to move into our panel discussion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just introduce our panelists initially, and then we will get going. So we have on our panel today Professor Datin Paduka Dr. Teo Su Huang, who is the Chief Scientific Officer at Cancer Research Malaysia. We also have Mr. Wong Kwan Seng, who is the President of Together Against Cancer. And just for context, for everybody's information, Together Against Cancer is a non-governmental cancer health advocacy organization that is actually made up of cancer survivors, healthcare professionals, as well as caregivers and the general public, who have actually all come together to advance the rights of cancer patients to equitable and high-quality cancer care. And lastly, we have Ms. Maheswari Jagannathan, my good colleague and friend. She's the manager for the Patient Navigation Program in Cancer Research Malaysia that seeks to help low-income women overcome barriers to timely cancer diagnosis, treatment, and care. Welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. As always, good to have you with us. Let's get this started with our panel discussion here today. Can I get the first fact on screen, please? Thank you. All right, so the first fact that's on the screen says the cost of cancer treatments and therapies has risen exponentially in the last 10 years. Prof. Teo, I'm going to direct this to you. Why is the developing cost of cancer treatment so expensive? So much research, fantastic work, but why so expensive, Prof. Teo?
Yeah, thank you. You've landed me on the toughest questions, G, and put me on the hot seat first.
That's right.
Well, I think the reality is that it's really critical that when we are able to give a therapy to a patient, we're able to show that it is not only effective, but it is safe for that individual, right? So paramount in all of these is making sure that a therapy is safe for that individual before it's given. And in order to be able to do that, we need to do clinical research and clinical trials. And unfortunately, these clinical trials take a lot of money. So it needs first to be tested in human beings to see whether it's safe. And then it needs to be tested in a phase 2 clinical trial to see whether it's effective, whether it actually does something to the cancer. And then it needs to be done in a larger clinical trial to see whether the treatment is actually better than what exists currently in terms of treatment. And only after that phase 3 clinical trial will regulators give it approval for it to be sold and marketed to patients. Now, unfortunately, the phase 1 clinical trials, even the cheapest clinical trials can cost anywhere from 10 to 20 million ringgit to be able to do. Phase 2 clinical trials, anywhere from 20 to 100 million. And then phase 3 clinical trials can go upwards from 50 million to up to 300 million. And it's estimated that the cost of development of one drug costs up to $1 to $2 billion at the moment. That's incredible. I mean, I sometimes have to pause and think how many zeros are there behind a billion, right? But that's the purported cost that it takes to show that a drug is effective before the regulators will actually allow it to be sold to the public. So of course, I'm a public myself, right? And I would want to make sure that we have a mountain of generic drugs, that instead of paying for these what we call innovator drugs that are still under patent, I would like a drug, once it's shown to be effective, to very quickly have a generic so that we have a mountain of generic drugs, right? That's also my wish. But the reality is that to get to that mountain of generic drugs, we first need to have innovator drugs where the pharmaceutical companies, so-called, can then make their returns to fund future research. Because if there's no money to fund future research, how do we create that mountain of how do we create that mountain of generic drugs? Even in the most high-income countries like the US, I was very, very surprised to learn, G, that even in these high-income countries, 90% of the drugs that they buy are generics. Right. 90% of the drugs that are consumed by end users, even in America, are generics. Only 10% are drugs which are still under patent. But the whole point is that without the cost of the drugs being protected under patent, what we're told at the moment, at least, is that protection enables the pharmaceutical companies to continue to invest in drugs, right? And that's a scary prospect, that soon, advances in all of these therapies might outstrip our ability to pay for them. And I think that's an atrocity. But how are we going to solve this? I think there needs to be a rethink of the patenting situation, as well as the cost that goes into the development of each of these drugs.
Yeah, it's amazing. A lot of stats, a lot of information. Even I'm trying to process. I'm thinking about $1 billion US. And you're right. I have no idea how many zeros there are, and I can't even fathom the amount of money that's needed to develop a drug. An innovative drug then becomes a generic drug, but through the innovation stage, it costs so much money that they have to patent it for X amount of years to remake the money so that then they can reinvestigate and get another drug going. Wow, it's just crazy. So that kind of explains a little bit about the cost itself. But cost aside, I mean, we look at COVID-19 and we look at the COVID-19 sort of vaccine and so on, and the drug. It took about 1.5 years, right, for them to come up with something. But when we think about, I mean, cost itself is a barrier already. It's so difficult to sort of contemplate. But then you think about the amount of time that's needed. Usually when you look at vaccines or you look at a treatment, it takes so long to develop. How come COVID-19 just 1.5 years, and then this one, the regular therapies and drugs take so long? Why is there a disparity there, Prof?
That's a fantastic observation, G, and a very well-made point, right? Why is it that the vaccines for COVID was able to be developed so fast? And it was because we were under very, very unusual situations that really affected the entire world. And in a sense, if we reflect back, it's really sad that, in the last 2 years alone, 5 million human beings died from COVID, right? It's a pandemic situation, an unheard of situation during our lifetimes. And because of this unusual circumstance that affected the whole world over, the regulators agreed that they're going to adopt a different way of enabling clinical trials to take place. So traditionally, clinical trials would take place by you have a phase 1 clinical trial, then you have to wait for the results of the phase 1 clinical trial to report before you start phase 2 clinical trials, which takes a longer time. And then you need to wait for the phase 2 clinical trials to report before you go your phase 3 clinical trials, which takes even longer because it requires more patients. But during the time of COVID, because of the extraordinary circumstances that we're in, the regulators allowed the clinical trials to go on like this. That means that before the phase 1 was completed, they already started the phase 2. Before the phase 2 started, they already started the phase 3. And because there were so many people affected, they could recruit to those clinical trials at an amazing speed,
right?
Almost a breakthrough speed, right? But because this is something that affects everybody, you can recruit very fast. But for cancer, because it's not so, it is common, but it doesn't affect everybody, the recruitment period takes a lot longer. And therefore, because these things take longer, it also costs more money. So that basically means that, cancer therapies, the development of these cancer therapies, unfortunately today, needs some rethinking of how do we make this go faster? How do we make it go cheaper so that it's affordable for individuals like you and me that don't live in a high income setting, that may not have very deep pockets? How do we make sure that cancer therapies can be available for patients as soon as they are affordably developed?
Right. Thank you, Prof. Yeah, that's really helpful. It helps me sort of make sense of, okay, there's a cost element, and why developing it takes so long. You have the 3 different phases. I mean, it costs so much as it is already, but then you've got longer time periods to test the efficacy of the drugs and so on. So it's really good to know. Even though it takes such a long time, it actually has a whole process that goes behind that thinking to developing a drug. Mr. Wong, I got a question for you. I'm just going to throw this question for you now. From your perspective, right? Why can't we bring in generic drugs? Prof. Theo talked about, okay, the innovative drug becomes a generic drug after X amount of years after the patent. Why doesn't Malaysia have enough generic drugs? Or, I mean, can we import them? What's going on?
Okay, thank you, Professor Theo, for inviting me to this webinar. Okay, I feel honored. Just before I answer your question, I'd like to a few points. I mean, sure. I find very interesting from Prof. Theo's remark that somehow or other we can mobilize the world to solve the COVID situation because 5 million people have died and so on. And I think through the years, cancer has also killed, I think, more than that.
Right.
And yet, why can't we just, learn a lesson from COVID, that we organize together, maybe the government, like what they have done, guaranteed that we'll buy certain vaccines or certain cure, and then, call them to gang up and find a cure for cancer, maybe through immunotherapy, maybe for whatever it is, and then, and then everybody chip in and say, look, we will put in some money for that. But just only observation, That's
Sure,
only,
Mr. Wong.
that's
Yeah,
only
thanks for
from
sharing.
what I heard, off the cuff.
Yeah.
Okay, your question is, why can't we have more generic?
That's right.
For my, I'm a cancer patient, I'm a prostate cancer patient, and I'm a survivor for 11 years. So I have seen quite a bit, learned a bit, but not really from the medical perspective. Okay, I'm basically a geologist. I'm oilman. Okay.
Okay.
But I've traveled a lot. I've stayed in many countries, US and UK, in my job, and many other countries. So I can look around and learn a bit. Okay. So why Malaysia has that? I think one of the reasons, if I can have the view graph, is that Malaysia's inherited, even from the colonial days, is what we call a custom act. You can show the view graph. I'll try to put. Do you have my view graphs?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's coming on screen right
we,
now.
we go for the back, actually. The last view graph.
Okay.
Okay.
No worries. It's coming on right now.
Yeah. We are really bound by our custom act. As I said, was inherited from our colonial days. Right at the back.
There you go.
No, the other one.
The other
down,
one. Huh?
One more down. And after
One
we
more
come
down,
up to here again. Yeah. Next one.
All right.
Now this is our custom act, which is really overriding. So nobody can import more than 1 month, per time. And if you go backward one slide, and the punishment is very severe. Now, if you are caught, you either have a maximum fine of 25,000 or a maximum jail of 3 years. Then if you are, importing more than 1 month. And this is so archaic. You know why? In US, it's 3 months. Now, this is very important because a lot of these so-called targeted drugs, actually, you can get it from elsewhere and import it legally. And if we can say we can bring in 3 months for our own, and it's so expensive, and nowadays it's so easy and so cheap to fly. And I think for one stroke, if we can persuade our government, say, look, can you change the act instead of 1 month to 3 months? I think that is very important because at least for our people, for those guys who cannot afford, and if you, of course, you are rich, you can afford, some of our drugs is about 7,000 or 8,000 a month or even higher.
Right.
And it's impossible. Either there's such thing is that, you have so much of financial toxicity that even, I was very upset. You know how I got very upset and very aggressive in our campaign for more generic is that when I asked one of the professors in one of the hospitals, I said, what happened? You encountered a financially challenged person and that the government is not going to give the real one, which is 7,500. Do you tell them that you can really get the generic from India or a reliable source and ship it in? They said, no, that is against our instruction. That means you are leaving them for dead. I mean, I thought that is not very acceptable. Now, I think, this custom act is really very, discouraging. That it won't allow us to really import more. And in the first place, we could, negotiate better. We are restricted by one of the clauses in the WTO agreement. It calls the TRIPS agreement, that we are bounded by all the patent rights. And because of that, we can't really what you call manufactured generic here.
Right. So essentially,
for
you're saying
certain target drugs. Yeah.
Right. So essentially, you're saying, Mr. Wong, that we are not able to get access to generic drugs because of the structure of our law, right? It doesn't allow us to actually get in more than 1 month's supply of generic drugs. I'm just going to turn to Prof. Su right now. Sure. Okay, we can't get 1 month. Of course, the impact is quite devastating when we think about the impact on low-income cancer patients. But Prof. Su, my question to you is generic drugs really the solution, or is there, any other solution or and so on? Yeah, is generic drugs really the solution?
Yeah, I think the whole point is that many countries are signatories of something called the Patent Convention Treaty. What that basically means is that it respects, countries sign up to respecting intellectual property, so that intellectual property gives the inventor some rights to hopefully make some money that covers their costs, as well as enables them to invest in future drug development. Malaysia is a signatory to the Patent Convention Treaty, unlike some countries that are not signatories. And the disadvantage of the countries that are not signatories is that actually the drugs turn up in those countries a lot later, because the pharmaceutical companies don't want those drugs to be reverse engineered to be manufactured in that country, because that country doesn't sign up to the Patent Convention Treaty. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Malaysia actually has very fast, relatively fast access to new drugs because it's a signatory and will prosecute properly for the Patent Convention Treaty, right? But of course, many patients who are suffering at that time will say, well, what about me? Do I have to wait until the patent expires before I can get access to a drug that I can afford? And, do I have another solution? Right. Well, I think the short-term solutions come from potentially price negotiations for the innovator drugs. And this is something that, the government has tried to do, tried to look to see whether it can negotiate better for prices of drugs. And it needs to do it at a level that is even beyond the shores of Malaysia, right? If you look at the National Health, the National Health Service in the UK, or many European countries, they negotiate hard for prices by doing it together as a National Health Service and by doing it together as an economic bloc. And because you do it together, you're able to then negotiate for a better price because you have a larger number of patients. Right. Malaysia, unfortunately, is a very small market. We only have 32 million people. It's a large number, but in truth, we have 40,000 new cancer patients a year, which from a pharmaceutical point of view is still very small. So if we want to have better negotiations for price for innovator drugs, we need to think about price negotiations that take place potentially in the ASEAN region. This is something that was discussed in the previous government to bring together the ASEAN countries and the ASEAN health ministers to discuss as a bloc, how do you bring down the cost of therapies for all the ASEAN countries, because Malaysia cannot take forward this on its own. So I do think that the solution needs to come from several fronts. One, to really think about how do we bring down the cost of the innovator drugs through negotiations as an ASEAN bloc. How do we improve access to generics and use generics more effectively, bring in generics as quickly as we can to be able to put pressure on the prices of the innovator drugs so that we can access generics and access cheaper innovator drugs in a timely fashion for patients. For the time being, those are the only considerations that we have. But I think third and most important is how do we get better at discovering drugs so that the entire cost of developing drugs comes down, and hopefully the starting price of innovator drugs is not driven so much by capitalism and the wish to make money, but more driven by community service and a need to serve patient needs and to save more lives.
Right. That makes sense.
To answer Mr. Wong's question about why is it that governments don't invest as much on cancer as opposed to COVID? Well, the answer unfortunately lies not in the number of deaths, but in a number of affected individuals. So 5 million deaths due to COVID in the last 2 years 20 million deaths due to cancer in the last 2 years, right? That's global deaths. But the reality is there were only 40 million people affected by cancer in the last 2 years globally, compared to 1 billion people affected by COVID in the last 2 years, or maybe even 2 billion people affected by COVID in the last 2 years. So that scale of the number of people affected is really what is driving the numbers, I think, in terms of investment for COVID versus investment for cancer. I would not want to wish for so many cancer cases in order to get investments in cancer. But I think we need to continue to advocate all of our governments to continue to invest in improving cancer care, because it is something that is rising all the time.
Right. That makes sense, Prof. Thanks for sharing. I think the sense that I'm getting is the solution is complex, intertwined, and interconnected. There's no one simple answer that can solve the whole thing. It's really a combination of different considerations, different factors and forces at work that need to be taken into perspective and looked at holistically. It's really quite tough, and understandably so. Just kind of leading off the first point, we talked about the cost of therapies that have risen exponentially and so on. There's actually a study, this is my next point, so next slide please. A study that says half of cancer patients face financial catastrophe after the first year of diagnosis. Prof, can you tell us more about this particular study?
This was a fantastic study led by Prof. Nirmala Bhupati, who is a professor at the medical faculty in University Malaya. And it was called the ACTION study because it was an acronym for the ASEAN Cost of Cancer Therapy Study, right? And Oncology Therapy Study. And what this study showed is they did a study across 10 different ASEAN countries, and they worked out through a financial diary and figuring out how much patients pay out of pocket. They worked out how many of these patients would actually face financial catastrophe within 1 year of diagnosis. It was really scary to find out that their definition of financial catastrophe was something like half of their income was lost as a consequence of that diagnosis. And they found that half of the cancer patients across the ASEAN continent, countries, face financial catastrophe within 1 year of diagnosis, and up to a quarter of patients had already died of cancer within 1 year of diagnosis, which is such an atrocity. This should not be the case.
Wow, right. Yeah, that is quite sombering to hear. Mahis, I got a question for you, right? Given that you are the PNP manager, or I should say the Patient Navigation Program, right? Manager, tell us a little bit about what you do and share some of what actually happens with the patients when they are facing this financial catastrophe, particularly perhaps focusing a little bit more on the low-income community.
Thank you for the question, Gurpreet. And thank you for joining us today for the webinar, everyone. We actually have a collaboration with Ministry of Health, and currently we have worked with them and integrated the first demonstration model in Hospital Tunku Abang Raya, just like how Prof. Su have actually introduced. So what we did was we integrated the patient navigation program to the breast cancer patient management. And through the program, we actually reduce the barriers or overcome the challenges faced by low-income women who are seeking treatment at the public hospital. Currently, we have the integrated program in Hospital Tunku Abang Raya Maklang, Hospital Tuanku Jaafar in Seremban, Hospital Queen Elizabeth II in Kota Kinabalu, and Hospital Umum Sarawak in Kuching. So these are our 4 centers currently that has used patient navigation program to assist especially low-income women, because these are the women that will be coming from the household income that is earning about 980 to 300 ringgit per month. So these are the women who will actually be seeking treatment at the government hospital.
Right. Thank you, Mais. Thanks for sharing a little bit of what you do. And what has your experience been when you kind of journey along with these patients? How do they deal with this whole financial weight, I suppose, when they are diagnosed with cancer? What is the response, or how do they react to something like this generally?
So for a lot of patients who comes in to the government settings, what happens is, because they come from a low-income family, And when diagnosis comes in, the reality is most of them who would have been earning this amount of money would have already have commitment in life, like for school children, for work, old folks, and basic needs at home. But now the diagnosis will actually have additional costs, where especially it will take up many of the costs will go into treatments, even though it's an affordable and it's subsidized, but still patient has to pay some small amount of money for treatment. And then especially transportation, that will actually take a lot of money, because they have to continue coming for follow-up clinics and review clinics. And then plus all the costs that will actually go in for sustaining themselves, like having nutritious food and ensuring that they actually can have good care at home. So these are the costs that actually will be an extra cost from whatever that they are already having as an income. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the cost layers just keep piling up, right? On top of the difficulty of making X amount of income, now I have to spend it on X amount of different things that really becomes a weight or a burden that I almost can't bear. I mean, even hearing that is quite difficult. Mr. Wong, having spoken about, say, the low-income population or community, I think you deal with more the urban population, right? Among the participants at Together Against Cancer and the Prostate Cancer Society, you generally deal with the middle income and the high income individuals. What is the impact financially on them when they are diagnosed with cancer? Is there a difference, or what is that? What is the outcome of that like?
Yeah, I think we used to say, cancer doesn't mean death. I think we should go towards cancer doesn't mean death or bankruptcy. That's one thing. Because a lot of innovative drugs that we, at the end of our journey, we will either have the choice. Either you go for a quick death, or you are financially going to lose quite a bit. And it's quite normal for our prostate cancer people before their final death to spend over $1 million.
Wow.
Just along the journey. And how many people can afford to do that, even in the middle income group? And of course, in the rural areas, they have no hope at all. That is very sad. It's a very sad situation. I think the government should do something as what Teo said, Prof. Teo said. We must be able to negotiate. Actually, the bulk of the cost is at the very end, the targeted drugs, which are very efficacious and they prolong life. Each of them prolong, especially prostate, is 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, and you add on to it, you can really prolong the survivorship of a prostate cancer patient. And as far as breast cancer, we are very sad that one of the, I involved with TAC and with a lot of breast cancer girls, and also before I was with the Keling Qigong, which have about 10,000 members, and a lot of people, a lot of them were women. And for those HER2 positive ladies, last time Herceptin was at least cost them the whole cost about 120,000. And now we have a biosimilar, and the cost is about 60,000, the whole cost, which is still very expensive.
Right.
And we should, have get a biosimilar, which is like something like generic, should be cheaper. I give you a good example. For prostate cancer, we have one very efficacious targeted medicine called Apitron acetate. In the past, for the real one, it costs us 7,500 per month. Again, very taxing for middle income group and even high income. And so after a lot of pressure and all that, and also by fortuitously, the patent about to end, we managed to get it imported, the generic imported from India, legally approved by NPRA. And even that, because the first generic, they charge us 4,000 a month. And we felt that we were being had because we fought so hard. And then later on, when the second generic came, we negotiated with them before they launched. And we managed to bring it down to 1,400. 60% discount. The market price is about 3,000. So, actually all these are very negotiable.
Right.
All this pricing for them to manufacture.
Right.
So we have to have some sort of price control in Malaysia. And this now, it is free for all. And I used to work in the States, I work for a big oil company. We lobby the US government, and bottom line is most important. The shareholders' return is the most important. If that's the case, you will never ending spiral upwards,
Right.
and it is very sad. Okay. I would like to show you a comparison between the various Asian countries. I think you have the view graph, right?
Yeah. Can
that.
you just show the graph, please?
You see, all the time I was fooled by when I talked to the drug companies, the comparative graph.
The second slide, I think.
The second slide.
There you go. Yeah.
This one that I highlighted. All the time during, I participate in most of the seminars of all the professional bodies, like the urology conference, oncological conference. We are invited to have a booth there, and I participate in that. When I approached all the representatives, they said, "Oh, Malaysia, as what you say, a small population, and you all have a higher income compared to the rest of poor fellas, poor country. Therefore, we charge you on affordability. Your Malaysian can afford." Now, that is not what is true. Well, this is what it is. The Malaysian is the median line. This one is from the ex-manufacturer price in 2014. It is a very rare comparison, because when I asked the Director General, Noh Hisham, one of them, he said, "Tell me the price of Singapore." And we were just dumbfounded because we don't know how to get that. Eventually, we got this. You find that, okay, as a whole, oncological drug, you'll be so sad that you see Japan paid 34% less than Malaysia on the oncological drug. In other words, you can go to Japan and buy whatever drug you have, you should be able to get a discount about 30 to 40%. If you go to Korea, 50%, half the price. Same drug. And then you go to Hong Kong, you get 15% or 25%. I can't read that thing. So
It seems quite clear from here, Mr. Wong.
It's quite clear. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, in a nutshell, as Professor Teo said, I think the government should know how to negotiate better and get it down a bit, because we cannot break the treaty we have. Maybe we can import it 1 month at a time. And then I think if you negotiate better, in fact, it will increase the volume, and maybe the profit might even maintain. And I think, and I think that another thing that is very important, I think you have heard a lot of saying that the government funding is a bit lacking in Malaysia. I think the last study that I come across, Malaysia spent 3 to 4% of our GDP for health services, which is much lower than the average of other countries, which I understand is around 6%.
Yeah, understand.
So I think we have to increase a little bit on that. I think we are on the right track. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wong. Thanks a lot for sharing. I mean, I think the intriguing fact for me here, what I kind of got away, of course, on top of a lot of the things that you shared, was that actually this whole matter affects not just the low-income community, but even the middle income and the T20s as well. I'm just going to move along just in the interest of time. Maya, this is for you. Yeah, this is talking about the next fact, and that is that the pandemic has made cancer care increasingly challenging and has had an adverse impact on patients. How has cancer care become worse now that we're in the pandemic as compared to prior to that? Given that you are on the ground, you are talking to patients, you are walking alongside them, caring for them. What's the difference, and what's that journey been like for you and the team?
So it was an extraordinary year last year for most of our patients that we navigated, because we have to navigate the 2 Cs, right? Cancer and also COVID. Patient, especially breast cancer patient who was newly diagnosed, the main 3 things that we saw and highly was reported by patient was actually the fear of this entire situation of a hospital, especially most of the navigation center is actually at the referral hospital, and many of the referral hospital were actually changing into hybrid hospital, and it was causing a lot of fear during at that time, because it was something new, and not only Malaysia but also the entire world actually was facing it, uncertain what will happen to their ongoing treatment, will it be stopped and all these things. The second was actually the MCO effect, the movement control effect that actually was started on the 18th of March last year. And we had like a series of MCO enhanced and all of these. So what actually it has happened, had as effect the patient was actually, patient were actually having travel ban, because they, we had 3 of the centers were actually state referral center, and patients were actually coming from all over the states for the treatment. And at early of the time, remember we all had to have travel documents, and slowly actually we progressed. Progressed, and we actually improved, where the hospital started to give travel letters, and then the government said that yes, you with your appointment cards now you can travel, you don't have to queue up in the police station for all of this. And then it was also, a lot of patients were actually having their children and their caregivers were staying away, so they could not actually travel and bring these people for continuation of treatment. So imagine our patients sometimes most of our patient breast cancer patient, their mean age is about 49 to 59, and most of them would like to somebody to come for the appointment, because doctor will be talking, and this will be actually having somebody next to them to understand what is the plan. So some of our patient was actually having great difficulty, even though we had navigators there, but not having your family members there, and we have to talk to the family members and relate those information, that caused a lot of anxiety. And the third one was actually the financial crisis that patient faced. So due to the pandemic, I think some of the spouse has actually lost job, so there was cut of income. People had to have a recession, and due to the financial situation, people have to move to remote working. So sometimes some of our patient has to travel back with their children, because they cannot afford to stay in 2 places because of cost. Right. And also there's a lot of costs increased because remote working, children were coming back to doing online studies. They have to pay for gadgets. So there was a lot of increase of cost. And we never imagined, right, like a country like Malaysia, we would have actually have the white flag. People cannot actually even put food on the table, right? Right. Like you can't even put food on the table. Now you have to go for treatment. There's a lot of situation which was very difficult for patient at that time, and also for basic needs, especially like sustaining rental, electricity, bill paying for water bills. That was really difficult for our patient during the pandemic. So it was really an extraordinary time for our patient.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it sounds to me, I mean, as it is, it seems like, there's so many barriers as it is for cancer patients, particularly low-income cancer patients that you deal with, to really even get access. And COVID, on top of that, added so many other layers of difficulty. And that's not so much that we want to compare COVID and cancer and make it a big debate. It's really the recognition and the understanding that, it did have an impact on cancer patients, and it made things really difficult. The next question I have, and this is particularly for you, I'm quite intrigued by this fact. Actually, it says, the next fact says 50% of Malaysia's annual breast cancer death could be prevented, and the proportions may be bigger for other cancers. But let's just focus on the breast cancer side, because that's what you work on. Is this really true? 50% of Malaysian annual breast cancer death could be prevented. What does that all mean?
So there's 2 ways. One is for women to come at early stage, where they come at early, where they know the symptom recognition, so they can actually come early and get screening. So you can actually detect most of the breast cancer staging at the early stage. The second one is access to treatment. Some of the treatment center may be in the central of the state, and people may be coming from rural. So they should actually have a very good pathway so that they can actually be channeled to the right treatment center at the right time.
Okay. Okay, understood. Prof, this one is next one is for you. Same sort of fact. It kind of mentions here a bit about maybe bigger for other cancers. So we talk about statistics, right? Lung cancer, colorectal, and so on. Are the stats kind of similar, or when we come talk about early detection, screening, and prevention, and all that, is that about the similar gauge in terms of breast cancer and other cancers, or where does the other cancer stand, I suppose, in the spectrum of things? Oh, you're muted, Bob. Sorry.
Sorry about that, G.
That's okay.
That's a great question, G, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of statistics for the other cancers. For cancers like cervical cancer, for example, we're working to eliminate cervical cancer, right? That's such a big word, to eliminate a disease. But that is a very real thing. If we can get individuals all to be vaccinated against the human papilloma virus, if we can get individuals to be screened for the HPV using a HPV DNA test, and if we can ensure that the individuals who are screened get treatment early, we could actually eliminate cervical cancer. Cervical cancer does not have to kill anybody. So the proportion of preventable deaths due to cervical cancer is potentially in excess of 90%. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
We really need to focus on what must we do to be able to prevent deaths due to a disease such as cervical cancer. Let's talk about other diseases. What about lung cancer? Could we prevent more deaths due to lung cancer? The harsh reality is that today there's a lot of underdiagnosis of lung cancer because individuals present with very late stage disease with lung cancer, which is why they oftentimes survival for lung cancer is unfortunately very poor because of late stage. Can we do better? Well, at the moment, there's no really good screening strategy for lung cancer, except maybe to do a low-dose CT scan among the individuals who are very high smokers. But we know that in the Asian setting, there are many Asian women that are more likely to get lung cancer, even though they're not smokers. So Asian female non-smokers, for some reason, get lung cancer. We don't know enough about why is it they get lung cancer, and how can we prevent more of these lung cancers. And then let's talk about colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is a disease where it is there's a screening modality that's available. And not only does it allow us to screen, it allows us to be able to remove the pre-cancers before they become cancer, right? Oh. So in the colon, you can actually, of course, the more common screening strategy is to do something where you need to pick up a piece of your poo, unfortunately, not a very nice test. Right. You need to pick up a piece of your poo and detect whether there's blood in that poo. And if you detect blood in the poo, one of the possible reasons could have been because of colorectal cancer. But there's another screening modality called colonoscopy. And in a colonoscopy, by putting up a scope or a camera up your bum and looking into the colon, if there's anything suspicious, like a polyp or something that looks as if it could develop into a cancer, the surgeon could actually remove it straight away. That then reduces your risk of having something develop into cancer in the future. Right. So potentially the preventable proportion of cancers such as colon cancer could actually be higher than the proportion of preventable cancers like breast cancer. And we simply don't know enough, and there must be more effort to prevent more cancers.
Right, makes sense, Prof. Thanks for sharing. Thanks a lot. We're going to move into our last fact, and we'll probably keep this brief since it's 9:04 and you've got about 25 minutes or so.
But sorry, G, I'm going to interrupt you because I think, Mr. Wong is part of a very large group, right, that works on prostate cancer. Yeah. This is a very controversial area. We all know that early detection of prostate cancer is associated with better survival. But there are also many cases of prostate cancer detected early that could be indolent diseases. What we mean by that is that they could be really, really slow growing diseases that don't actually alter the life course of a man. And, we might actually be telling a lot more men that they have cancer, but really what we should be telling them that they have cancer that may not kill them. And that's a very big problem with prostate cancer, right? So what is Mr. Wong's opinion on this? What is the situation here?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, being a prostate cancer survivor, I'm very grateful. I thank God that I got diagnosed early, or else I won't be sitting down here with you guys. I tell you, a lot of controversial saying that, look, no PSA testing will give you a lot of false alarm. No, you save a lot of lives. Unnecessary death, that's what you say. I believe that those people over 60, I got diagnosed when I was 65. Now I'm 77, 76. I survived 11 years, 11 good years in which I woke up and felt that I can do something for society. So anyway, I tell you, whatever argument it is, saying that, no point, I agree that there's no point testing, those guys in their 50s, 55, because the incidence of prostate cancer is very low. And we might have to sacrifice a few lives. But beyond that, like up to 60, 65, please go and have your PSA tested. In fact, we campaign a lot. I got one whole bunch of coupons that you can get a free PSA test in Beacon Hospital from January to April. We fought so hard, they gave us one big chunk. So anybody wants a free PSA test, please write to me, and I got a whole bunch of it in my car, ready to distribute.
Mr. Wong, you're going to be everyone's best friends.
Yeah.
You're going to get it for their fathers, their brothers, their uncles.
On top of that, listen, I'm also in the Neurological Trust that set up what you call Only Man Can, with a big generous donation led by Nazir Razak. Now it's Tan Sri Nazir Razak. Okay, Tan Sri Nazir Razak and his friends gathered about 5 million, and we are allowed to spend 1 million each on awareness and also detection. So what it is, our end game is like this. Now you find that for prostate cancer, it is in the in our medical registry. 68% of the diagnosis of prostate cancer are stage 3 and stage 4, non-curable. Okay, and in other countries, it's only 40%. Now, how do we attain that? So our aim is, if we can reach to 50, I think we have done our job. 50%, stage 3, stage 4. That is very good. How to do that? Encourage more PSA testing, yeah, and then more awareness campaign, and really promote a healthy lifestyle, more exercise, eat less meat, or eat a balanced diet. Okay, not excessive fat.
Right.
Okay, that is my take.
All right. Awesome, Mr. Wong. Thank you for sharing. It's great. I mean, I think it seems like you're doing so much good, and I'm really glad and thankful that you are part of our webinar here today, along with us. I'm just going to share the last fact here, fact number 5. And Mr. Wong, this is actually for you first, and then I'll go to Mahesh after that. The fact says getting patients access to treatment drugs solves only half of the problem. And I think this is actually positioned in the sense of talking about investigations, like ultrasound, CAT scans, CT scans, and so on. Based on your experience, Mr. Wong, has access to investigations like ultrasound and CT scans and all that really been a problem for cancer patients that you deal with, or within the society that you're in?
Yeah, our problem is, for prostate cancer, I think the problem is that in some hospital, because I cover the whole of Malaysia, and it's very sad, because I give you an example. Ipoh doesn't have a residential urologist, and every week Datuk Rohan Malik or another urologist travel from KL to Ipoh. And in between, what happened? If there are some guys have cancer, you have to wait for 1 week. And or some other, what happened if the cancer deteriorate? It's very sad. And then on top of that, you have other places, like Sarah and Sabah is, of course, is very pitiful. Access to anything is very, very difficult. Yeah. And we have a cancer in Miri, for instance.
Right.
When the COVID came, they were just really couldn't do anything because they can't fly to Kuching. And even the travel from some of the trainee urologists coming to Miri is very difficult.
Right.
And it is a problem. Yeah, it is a problem.
Okay, understand. Yeah. Mahesh, from your perspective, I think Mr. Wong talked about prostate cancer, and you deal with breast cancer patients, particularly in the public hospitals. What is the situation on the ground there when it comes to imaging and using this technology, screens and scans and so on? What's the situation on the ground in public hospitals with the patients that you deal with in the localities that you're in?
Yeah. So currently, the Ministry of Health is actually doing all that is possible for helping patient and putting out priorities for people who really needs. But because of the load, the number of cases that is waiting, it causes waiting lists, and because of that, undeniable that there is a waiting list at the Ministry of Health hospital, despite of them trying all the as much as possible to do the best for the community out there. But for even the pink ribbon centers, we're trying to actually have negotiation with the pathology department and also X-ray department, that we actually have negotiated and say that if any women who may actually come in with suspicious finding, we should be able to offer them a triple assessment within the 7 days, so that within the 7 days we can actually give them timing for breast cancer patient. That will actually reduce the anxiety, saying that okay, around this time you will get your triple assessment, so patient don't have to go elsewhere or try to see if she can actually get some money or even travel out to somewhere else, like alternative treatment to do something else. So we are doing as much as possible together with the Ministry of Health to help breast cancer patients.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mahesh. I think I'm really encouraged by that. I mean, I think the reality is we probably have to acknowledge that there's some waiting involved, but you and your team are trying really hard to optimize that and try to squish it as fast or as compact as you can. 7 days is the timeline, and within 7 days, you hope to get the patients to see the doctor and so on.
That is so important, G, because I think it cannot be emphasized how much anxiety that causes, right? If you can imagine, you can't get a resolution, or you keep having to come back for a biopsy, or you don't know is it cancer or not cancer. And then someone tells you, oh, here, take this herb. My friend so and so tells me that it will shrink it, or my friend so and so doesn't say that you need to go back to hospital and so on. Once patients start with that alternative, it's actually very difficult to get them back into a hospital case system. Right. So it's really critical, the work that Mahesh and team do, the work that BCWA and other cancer organizations do in navigating patients from the community to follow up in the hospitals to get rapid diagnosis is really critical as a part of the solution to improve survivorship. So that's why the statement is important, because we always advocate for better access to treatment drugs. And I acknowledge that is very important, but other aspects that we also need to work on, about access to rapid diagnosis, access to imaging, not just for diagnosis, but for follow-up, to know whether the treatment is working, to know whether it's necessary to change treatment. All of that needs imaging, and we simply need more investments, not just in the drugs, but also in the experts and in the hardware, the infrastructure that enables us to treat patients holistically, right? But I think a lot of what Mahesh deals with as well is also about out-of-pocket costs for loss of income, for all of the other aspects. If we can provide all of these services, but patients cannot put food on the table, they're still not going to come forward for treatment, because they're still not going to be able to make it to the hospital in a way that enables us to help them,
Right, right.
I think what they have to is implement some sort of time limit from really the diagnosis to treatment must be maximum 1 month or something like that. Right. Because in the rural areas, let's say like Kuantan and a few other outskirts, they have only got one consultant, and only the consultant can make decision. So from really point A to the treatment, it'll be much longer. By the time maybe the cancer had metastasized and became more difficult to treat. I think the government should, I talked to IKN last time, I told us director, I said, look, you guys, put our PSMA scan, and some people wait for 2 months. What is that? Then he said, okay, Mr. Wong, I promise you, it'll be 1 month. And then slowly and surely you'll be longer and longer and longer because of a waiting list. What can you do? There's only one place in the government side can give a PSMA test, that is very important for prostate cancer. So there you are.
It is really critical that as part of the cancer control plan, oftentimes we look at the cancer control plan and we only look at whether there's a drug fund and whether there's enough investment to pay for targeted therapies, for example. But actually the solution to better cancer control is a lot more complex than that. And I do think that investments in building better infrastructure to serve the rural communities, having a cancer center up north, having better cancer centers in the East Coast, having better cancer centers in Sabah and Sarawak are very high up on the priority list for the Ministry of Health. And we must continue to support the government's efforts because it's about improving access, not just to the cancer drugs, but also to the infrastructure, also to the doctors and the expertise that are necessary, not just oncologists, but also surgeons, pathologists, radiologists, and so on, urologists, chest physicians, etc. All of these experts are absolutely critical if we're going to be able to be more effective in the fight against cancer. And of course, individuals like great nurses like Mahes, the allied health professionals, absolutely critical. Nurses like Mahes, genetic counselors, physiotherapists, lymphedema experts, and so on, are all critical in the fight against cancer.
Right. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And it sounds to me like, as we were talking about earlier, the solution is not focusing on one end of the spectrum. It's really looking at the totality of the system and how they interact and trying to solve it through the different facets of the larger ecosystem. Thank you so much, Mr. Wong, for the things that you do. I think really fantastic, really encouraged by your journey and then by your desire, I suppose, to really want to give back and fight for other cancer patients so they can get access, and that regulations will kind of come in line to getting others access as well. And for Mahes, I think you and your team, of course, have always been very dear to my heart, right, in terms of the work that you guys do and the impact that you create. And of course, Prof being the mastermind, so to speak, that started the organization. Really appreciate it, the work that you all do and the effort that you put in. And oftentimes it's not seen or known or heard, but it is really impactful. And I just want to take this moment sort of off the cuff just to really say thank you for the work that you do in the ways that you do it. We have about a couple more minutes. Just one Q&A question. We're just going to move into the Q&A question. And after the Q&A question, I think there's a few that's already answered. I will just ask each of you to just share what is your take-home message for today. If there's one thing that you feel absolutely everybody here should know, must take home, what would that be? I've just parked that with you so you can think about that. But here's a question from anonymous attendee. All right, so Mr. or Mrs., I don't know, right? Anonymous attendee is saying, why certain breast cancer can only be detected using ultrasound and not mammogram? Prof. Theo, I think this one is probably more for you.
Yeah, sure. I think there are also a number of questions that I've answered, but if you want, G, we can if we have time, we can do a quick fire and read off those questions and answer them live. Awesome. But I think mammograms are about 90 to 95% sensitive in terms of being able to detect as many lesions as possible. And they're certainly a lot more accurate and a lot more sensitive than an ultrasound would be. But there's certainly some lesions that just doesn't give you a very good image on a mammogram, and we don't know yet why that might be the case. It might just be the location, that the location of that particular lesion is near a nipple or near other regions that make it difficult for an X-ray to detect it, because the X-ray of a mammogram, maybe there's a lot of fibers and glands there that prevents the image to be clear, because you're effectively already seeing a white patch because there's a lot of fibers and glands. If there's a cancer hiding behind that, you won't be able to see it in a mammogram. But because an ultrasound works using a different technology, uses a sound reflective technology, enables you to see a distinction between the cancer and the non-cancer in very dense tissue in ways that allows you to detect cancers more accurately. So in Asian women, we generally recommend that women have both a mammogram as well as an ultrasound, particularly if they have dense breasts. And because Asian women are more likely to have dense breasts, very often, about 30% of the women who have a mammogram, they're usually also recommended to have an ultrasound.
Okay. Right, awesome. Thanks so much. Different technology, different capacity, different outcomes. All right, so I'm just going to do the rapid fire
Nice
thing.
brief answer compared to my very, very
No, great.
Well done.
You're the expert. So I'm just summarizing it so it's helpful for everybody. I love this rapid fire type of thing. I like intensity, so I'm just going to go and fire some questions and let's see how we go here. Daniel has a question that I would actually ask. Thank you, Daniel, for asking this. Fantastic. What causes cancer that can spread in our body? Is it because of food that we ate, or what is it? What causes all of this?
Well, cancer is caused by genetic changes that changes the behaviors of the cells. So essentially, normally cells don't divide out of control, but when there are changes in their DNA that's caused by mutagens, that means things that affect the DNA, like the UV light or the cigarette smokes and the food that we eat, then the DNA changes in a way that gives the cancer cells an ability to grow. Some more genetic changes can mean that cancer now, instead of growing where it's supposed to grow, can grow elsewhere. It's growing not where it's supposed to grow, kind of like weeds in the garden, right? It's growing where it's not supposed to grow.
Right.
So those are driven by genetic changes. But whether food that we ate actually causes those genetic changes, actually the effect of food is relatively small. It's not likely to have that major effect. But what is important to note is that cancer isn't caused by one thing, it's multifactorial. It's caused by many different things. So you can't cut away all your food and eat organic and only eat water and rice and the rest of it. Really need to go ahead with a balanced diet, because a balanced diet is very important for your immune system, and your immune system is a key component in fighting against cancer.
Okay, got it. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, Prof. Second question. Thanks, Cancer Research Malaysia. Kindly also share any collaboration work with our Health Ministry, past and any future plans. Any work with the ministry? Any future plans?
Would you like to take this question?
Mahes?
Right. We've been working for patient navigation program. We have been working with the Ministry of Health, and you know that I've actually explained about the 4 centers that existingly now operating in 4 states. So in future, most probably there is future new sites. Most probably will be coming in the north side of Malaysia, most probably in Kedah, and also we are looking into possibility of in east is either Kelantan or Kuala Terengganu. So these are the new things most probably will be coming in 2022.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Mahes. There's one about cosmetics and so on. I find really intriguing by anonymous attendee. If I frequently dye my hair, can it cause cancer and cancer recurrence? What about using lipstick and chemical-laden stuff and all these kind of things? Does it cause cancer? Prof, maybe you can answer this.
There's so many things around us that could cause cancer. The reality is that we're surrounded by chemicals, and many of these chemicals have an ability to mutate the DNA, right? But we can't avoid all of these chemicals because we will lead such a frightening life that we just want to hide in a hole and never ever go out, never ever look beautiful, and never ever do anything with our lives. So I think a lot of it is about moderation. I think if you can avoid chemical exposure, then please do. If you are working in an environment that exposes you a lot to chemicals, be it in asbestos or cigarette smoke or a lot of pollutions and so on, please avoid those. But for the more normal things, then I would say that, oftentimes these are very, very extensively tested, and the consumer associations are very active in ensuring that, most of the common products that are used don't have a high dose of carcinogens, so we shouldn't be excessively worried. I mean, one of the things that I'm always worried about is really the fogging that they put around to get rid of mosquitoes. I'm constantly worried about that, right? And I'm like thinking, why is it that we don't just, clean our gardens a little bit better so that we don't have to fog so often?
Right.
But that must be introducing carcinogens in our environment. And we really need to, think about how it is that we lead our lives, especially in an urban area.
Right. Prof, I think if you're worried about the fogging and so on, I'm worried about the hairspray that I use. Sometimes now I'm thinking, maybe I should do this tall and beautiful thing and just go bald so I don't have to use this hairspray and breathing all these chemicals. Thanks, Prof. That's great. One last question. I will go because we need to kind of close in 5 minutes. Talking about soy products and breast cancer, I think we have some work here, so I think I'm quite intrigued by this. Will taking soy products cause reoccurrence of breast cancer? How frequent can cancer survivors take soy products?
Yeah, short answer to that is we don't know enough about soy and recurrence of breast cancer. So there's some indication that soy actually reduces the risk of recurrence, and that was done in a clinical trial. And we think that the metabolism or how soy is processed is different in Asian women compared to in Caucasian women. But so far, there's been no real study in Asian women that distinguishes what happens in Asian women in terms of recurrence to breast cancer. Hopefully, this is a study that we can do in the future, not something that we have started yet, but we would love to be able to take on more of these studies.
All right, awesome. Okay, one last question, last one by Chan. Why can't government hospitals let us have a copy of our mammogram or ultrasound? Mais, maybe you can take this one, government hospital.
Right. I think it depends on, let's say a patient is going for a second opinion. Most probably you can actually speak to the doctor. We allow patient to borrow, like in loan, saying that they can actually bring it to the second opinion and then bring back. But in case that you may need all these things for as part of your record, you can also apply it to the medical record and get a copy of that information through the medical record. But most probably, these are the copies sometimes you don't get, but you can actually ask the doctor to write a memo for you in case that you need to go for referral or you would like to keep it to yourself.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Mahesh. Thank you, everybody, for asking the questions and all of that. I think there's another question, but Prof is actually going to type it in. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to move forward. Thank you. Really enjoy questions. We really want you to be able to voice your questions out, and we enjoy actually responding to them and interacting. I think it's what makes us human and makes the whole process a lot more enjoyable. So thank you, panelists, once again for sharing a lot of your insights with us here today. Many insights, so much information, lots for us to all think about. And I think certainly just through moderating this, I really enjoyed the whole experience. And we have all learned a lot from today's session. So ladies and gentlemen, I think regardless, no matter if you are today a curious learner or a patient advocate or a patient itself, I think one of the things is quite clear, right, from today's session, that in order for us to come up with all these insights, we really need research to continue, right? Understanding the certain spaces, understanding the different complexity of how things interact, what are the different factors, what needs to be done. It's all research work and understanding the whole component, right? And understanding cancer, even as it goes to the genetics and so on. And as long as research continues, we believe really there is hope. Hope for cancer patients and also hope for their families. Right, so before we bring things to a close, I just want to share a really short story that I find really delivers a powerful message. And it goes something like this. There was a man that was walking home one day, and he was walking home and he found a piece of paper stapled on the electric pole. Usually in Malaysia, if you go through the lamppost, there's people puts number, you call them for plumbing or whatever. So he saw this piece of paper on the electric pole with a small note on it. And because he's naturally very curious, he wanted to know what was actually written to it. So he got closer to it, he read it. And on that paper, it said, I lost 50 ringgit somewhere on the road. If you can find it, please give it to this address. My eyesight is not so great, so please help me. So the man followed that address and found out that there's this old looking hut. And outside of the hut of the house, there's an older woman that was sitting outside, and she was quite weak, quite frail, quite fragile. And the man told her that he had come to the house because he found 50 ringgit on the road and wanted to hand it to her. And the lady began to slowly kind of tear up hearing this. And she said to the man, my dear, I had at least 30 or 40 people come over to my house to give me 50 ringgit saying that they found it on the road. Actually, I didn't write this note. I can't even see properly. I can't really read or write or really understand, properly. Then the man said, no, it's okay lah. Auntie, you keep it. Keep it. It's important for you. So she told him, okay, I'll keep it, but make sure when you go back, you just tear it and don't put it back in the place that it was on the lamppost. So when he was walking back, he was thinking, I wonder who this person is that actually put this note on the lamppost. And it took a while to really think about it, and he felt gratitude. He felt thankful because someone saw someone else in need and they put something on the lamppost so that he can actually make a difference. And he recognized that a lot of the times people that are going through difficult times are not going to voice their opinions. They're not going to tell everybody about what they're going through. I mean, Mahesh and the patients that she goes through and walks with really open up to her because she goes into the situation, tries to understand and empathize and hear them out and have those intentional conversations. Especially in our culture, it's very difficult to do those things. So what he decided to do is, okay, he decided, I'm not going to tear it up. I'm actually going to pay it forward, and I'm going to put that sticker back onto the lamppost. You see, wherever there is a human need, there is an opportunity for kindness. There is an opportunity to make a difference. And many cancer patients go through that, right? They suffer alone. They don't want their voices to be heard so much, and they go through this all on their own. And as a non-profit organization that is bent on saving lives through impactful research, we want to be their advocates. We want to write those notes and make sure that every patient matters. We want to improve this reality, that there are treatments that are more accessible. People can go for scanning. I think about Mr. Wong and the work that he's doing, fantastic. He's fighting for the cause of cancer patients. We all want to save lives, but we also know as a non-profit organization, we can't do this alone. As a non-profit organization, we actually need you. We need you to journey alongside with us so that we can discover more things, we can implement more treatments, we can figure out the timelines and the structure and talk to the Ministry of Health and bring it all together and do the work that really matters. Because people matter, lives matter, patients matter, outcomes matter. So please join us to contribute towards the Bold and Beautiful campaign, whether it's 10 ringgit or 50 ringgit or 100 ringgit, whatever it is that it is your capacity, it's totally fine. Support is crucial. We need your support. And today we have the opportunity, having recognized that there is a human need, to play our part. And there's 3 ways that you can do that, right? You can be a shaver, right? Shave it. Don't use hairspray like me, right? I was thinking, yeah, maybe I should just shave my head. Okay, fantastic. If that's you, go do it. Be a fundraiser. Ask your friends, ask your parents, if your parents are here, ask your parents, ask your friends, ask your co-workers, ask 10 ringgit, 20 ringgit. Come on, donate. Let's do something good together. Build that sense of momentum. Or you can do both. You can shave your head, or you can be a fundraiser. You can find creative and innovative ways to rally around this cause, because every life matters. And you can look at the next slide. You'll see the QR code. If you feel compelled to share, you feel compelled to do something good, and you feel that there is a role for you to play to help advocate cancer research and to help support cancer patients and their family, this is the way to do it. 3 ways: donate, share, fundraise, play your part. For more information, you can always go to mystarfishfoundation.org.my. And like we said, we encourage all of you to play a part, because ultimately, as much as patients matter, you also matter, because you have a role to play in the grand scheme of things. We talked about interconnectedness, how different factors come together. We all have a purpose, we all have a reason, we all have a role to play. All right, that's about it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Hopefully it encouraged you, challenged you, strengthened you, and empowered you to take the next best step. Until next time, thank you so much. We will catch up again once again for our next webinar. We'll keep you informed. Check out our social media, all the different platforms. We'll keep you guys informed on our work, as well as any other interactions that we have. Thank you so much. God bless. We'll catch you again soon.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
You're here, you're loved, you are alive. Rewrite your future, you know that the phoenix will rise. I'm by your side. Everything's gonna be alright. It's just the darkest, just right before the dawn. Then it's a new day, your chance to take a breath. There's been pain, there's been tears, when you said that you can't go on. But have faith and embrace. Now the sun has come, Let it shine and show your path. You're here, you're loved, you are alive. You're not your past, who you are is much stronger than that. But if you fall, you get up and fight with your mind. You're here, you're loved, you are alive. Rewrite your future, you know that the phoenix will rise. I'm by your side. Everything's gonna be alright. A brand new spirit, the time has come to soar. Ooh, that strength within you, no one can tear it apart. Wipe your tears, don't forget those scars prove you have been through all. So stand tall, spread your wings. You have braved through your pain. Now let your courage take flight. You're here, you're loved, you are alive. You're not your past, who you are is much stronger than that. But if you fall, you get up, fight with all your might. You're here, you're loved, you are alive. Rewrite your future, you know that the phoenix will rise. I'm by your side. Everything's gonna be I'm here, I'm loved, I am light. I'm not my past, who I am is much stronger than that. But if I fall,